the whole theory of political control by imposition of the rule of law from above, which is, alas, the Christian theory of the universe. This is the way God is operating. God is personally aware with his full, total consciousness of every atom of existence. Think of having to be occupied with the vagaries of every human mind. Poor God, the victim of his own power game. And Lao Tzu is saying that in the art of ruling, you do not use force. You never press the issue. He likens the functioning of the Tao to water. And he says, now water is always taking the line of least resistance. It doesn't strive. It always seeks the low level, which men abhor because they always want to be on top. But what can you do with water? You can't cut it. You can't injure it. You can't compress it. So he's saying, in other words, if you want to govern the nation, you must behave like water. He has a conception of the Tao which is, as it were, the exact opposite of all conceptions of God. He says this: the great Tao flows everywhere, both to the left and to the right. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. And when merits are accomplished, it lays no claim to them. It says, the swishing wind does not last out the morning. The pelting rain does not go on all day. If heaven and earth cannot keep these things up, how much less can man? So he has an idea of the emperor as an anonymous sort of person who would be, in other words, to a political community in the same way as today the sanitary engineer is. Never would you imagine the sanitary engineer going through town in a great car with a police escort and flags in all directions. Nobody even knows who the sanitary engineer is, and yet he's a very important official. Without him, there would be health problems and all sorts of difficulties. But because he's in charge of the sewers, everybody would say, well, that's not very glamorous. And Lao Tzu is saying that the chief official of the state should have the same attitude as the man in charge of the sewers. That the less he parades himself, the more effective he can be. The less that's known about him, the better. So he says the energies of the emperor should be directed to keeping the minds of the people unpreoccupied and their bellies well filled. In other words, let's not have news about politics. Let the newspapers be full of interesting things, not political things, but our newspapers, which are all about politics, are full of catastrophes. You open the newspaper and what do you read? What is news? Bad news is news. But the saying, you know, no news is good news. All news is bad news. They don't say the great things that are going on. Very rarely. So Lao Tzu advocates no news at all. No discussion of politics. He says, my ideal state would be a small one in which you could hear the chickens in the neighboring state. And there would be no apparent government. It's a kind of anarchy. But of course, anarchy depends upon everybody being responsible. Therefore, if you are going to have a control of an enormous amount of information, it has to be delegated, and you have to trust them all to work together. A highly organized system where a lot of detail is going on has to be a system of mutual trust. There is no way of bossing it. If you want to have it at all, you have to have it by letting go and saying to all the units in it, come on, let's play together. But the moment you come on uptight about them and say, now, I want an accounting from each one of you, each one of them feels a little mean about it, and will conceal information, and you, if you're going to keep charge of the whole thing in that style of behavior, are going to have your hands full. Too full. You won't be able to watch it all. So therefore, every organic complexity works by the delegation of authority. Every organic unity is a system of love, that is to say, of mutual trust, which says, thank God I've got you around. I often think about this. Somebody does something that's marvelous, and I think, what a relief that you could do that and I didn't have to. All that effort that you put into doing this is so beautiful, and it just relieved me of the necessity. See? And that's the way that the life principle really works. In complete opposition to any idea of lordship, of all the credit belongs to me. You as an ego, supposing you've achieved something great, and you say, no, it wasn't my ego that did it. It was all these myriad little molecules and cells, each one of whom contributed to this extraordinary thing that I did. See, you can go in that way towards infinite diversity and say of everything that you did, no, it wasn't me, it was my people. It was all these little fellows who, each one of them did it. To the degree that you go towards the infinitude of the little ones, to that extent you have a true sense of unity. Whereas if you don't give any credit to the little ones and you say, well, I just push them around and so on and so forth, you don't realize how things are put together. This is the true inner meaning of the principle of non-duality, that the truest unity is the same thing as the most detailed multiplicity. You don't know what you mean by unity unless you understand multiplicity. The one throws out the other idea. They balance each other like the back and the front. So in exactly the same way, the more you go for highly articulate multiplicity, the more you get unity. The whole idea of the giving in to the other, trusting it to do it. So this is the real secret underlying the democratic principle, the notion of what a republic is, as distinct from a monolithic monarchy, where the people cease to trust themselves and say to an authority, please, you take care of us instead. It works exactly the opposite direction. And that direction is the opposite direction of the way in which all living organisms flow and manifest themselves.